They want to keep the mechanism going, and that is nothing but a wealth transfer. Stealing from the middle class is being decimated. Absolutely decimated. They don't care about the lower class of people because they got no cash at all. The middle class has the bulk of the money. They're finding every way that they can to redistribute that wealth or steal it from the middle class and push it to the upper echelon of society. We're watching something unfold here, and we have been for quite a while, that is absolutely epic and is going on right into people's noses, and that is a creation of a two-tier society. We are not going to have a middle class in a few years. This next crash, which is coming in the equity market, when the debt bubble bursts, in my opinion, we're going to see a crash here that is going to make everyone before it look like child's play.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Today we have a special guest, Gregory Mannarino, a former stock and equities trader with the trading arm of Bear-Stearns Incorporated. He's with us. He's also an expert on the current trends in the financial markets. We're here to talk with him about his opinions of what's going on that causes real and present danger to the finances of the average American family, what you can do to protect yourself and your family from irreparable harm if the system should collapse, and what you can also do in the meantime to profit from imbalances in the current financial markets. Gregory, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate it.
So, Greg, a lot of the viewers on our channel are concerned about the risks that are present in the current financial system, and I wonder if you could just give us an outline of what you consider to be the gravest risks to individual families' finances today, and maybe some of the causes that you see of those risks in the broader financial markets and systems, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure, absolutely. I would say, honestly, the number one risk is not understanding how the system works. And the number one thing people need to understand is this is completely and absolutely rigged against them. It's not taught in schools. People don't understand really what is probably, one of the most important things they're going to end up engaging in throughout their entire life, and that is the pursuit of, I guess, wealth in one form or the other, or the pursuit of just trying to get by here. We have a system that at its core is designed to create debtors, not wealth. This is why so few, and I want to say not just Americans, but people around the world are able to get ahead in this twisted system. And without people having just a basic understanding that we have a debt-based economic model that is designed to create debt and debtors, if they don't just understand that, they're just frankly doomed, and they're going to get duped and taken advantage of by the Wall Street banks, by the world central banks, and everything else as well. So with that said, and in the current state of affairs that we have here, we have to understand this. At its most basic level, the greatest risk to the system is the system itself, and that is the relentless acquisition of debt in perpetuity. That's the basis of the system. Once we admit we can't borrow any more cash into existence, the system will collapse, and we are very, very close to that. We can see this by the actions of the world central banks, who cannot print enough or buy enough debt with this printed cash out there to keep the system propped up. And the Federal Reserve has not stopped their quantitative easing program, despite what they're trying to force feed us. This must be understood at its most basic level. For years now, the Federal Reserve has required the banks to hold excess cash in reserves, not to lend it out, but to hold this cash in reserves. Now we find out just a couple of weeks ago that the Federal Reserve is requiring the banks to hold liquid assets. They have no choice in this. So I had pondered for a very long time why The Federal Reserve was requiring the banks to hold liquid assets or cash that they could not lend out, but just to hold it. Now I understand it clearly. The Federal Reserve has now continued their quantitative easing program through other means. It's a backdoor mechanism having the banks buy the debt to keep the system propped up. If you notice what happened, right after the Federal Reserve, in fact, the next day, if the Federal Reserve announced it was ending quantitative easing, we had Japan yet to engage in another round of quantitative easing. I think it's number 5 or 6. I don't even know what it is. And we also understand that the ECB is going to be following suit as well. They already have negative interest rates. They're already requiring banks to hold assets. It's going to be very soon before they, in my opinion, before they initiate another full-on Federal Reserve-style quantitative easing program, despite what obstacles are going to lie in their way regarding Germany as well. But the system is broken, and people need to understand very simply that if they don't start betting against the debt now, they risk losing all of the paper dollars that they think they own, which they do not own anyway. They're owned by the issuing central bank plus interest that's owed back to them plus interest. It's a sick system. So people need to be understanding they need to get away from these bills here. Despite what the U.S. dollar has done lately, yes, it has gone up against versus other fiat currencies that are currently in the toilet as well. And the world central banks are going to do things still to keep this propped up, and the only thing they can do is print cash out of thin air, add it to a digital screen, buy debt. That's all they can do. And that proves to us all that we are very close to the end here.
So people who have grave reasons, as you've pointed out, for concern about the threat to their family's finances and to the world's finances of the structure of the current system, what are some very basic and concrete steps that the average person can take to protect themselves and their family?
Well, the number one thing is this. You have to understand that in a worst case scenario here, and you always have to think of things in a worst case scenario, we could witness an event here globally which will wipe out a large portion of human life. Understand, the global debt issue has allowed us to create an alternative universe. In other words, we've borrowed cash from the future to live a better now. So what that has allowed us to do is explode the global population, which has risen in tandem with the debt. Once the debt bubble bursts, and the debt bubble has created a human bubble. This is something I've written about, I've spoken about it at length many, many times. And once this debt bubble bursts, and it will burst, because every single other bubble before it has burst. There's never been one exception in history where a bubble, whether it's a tulip mania or whether it's a credit bubble recently, 2008, or whatever it might be, these bubbles burst because they rise above a level that can be sustained by any means. Now, the world central banks are still trying to sustain this debt bubble. They understand that once this bubble bursts, and this is where we are now one nation under surveillance, okay? They understand that there's going to be rioting in the streets, and there's going to be people out there who are going to be absolutely lost and destitute, that have no means to acquire food or basic assets to live. So even the most well-prepared people will not make it through in a worst-case scenario. Worst-case scenario, we have a currency collapse. We go back to a barter system. We will have a martial law. This is a distinct possibility here. We're already seeing threats to the petrodollar system, which, it's all part of a farce here. And this is going to lead to global war. So what people need to understand, again, at its basic level is this. Become your own central bank. This is what I've been saying since I sat down in front of a computer and started blogging and writing books and everything else I do. And becoming your own central bank means give the issuing central bank back their fiat bills that you don't even own anyway. They own them. They're owed back to them, plus interest that they print out of thin air. And right now could not possibly be a better time to be acquiring hard assets. I've been talking about this again since day one. People need to be in hard assets. Now, this is not a trade. This is an investment over a long period of time. These are actual pieces of wealth. They're not pieces of debt. That's what people need to understand. So from a financial standpoint, I can't imagine a better place to be or to protect your wealth than in hard assets.
From your standpoint, and we don't give direct financial advice to people on this channel. That's not what this is about. This is about raising awareness. But from your personal opinion, what is a realistic range of a family's net worth that you would imagine that they should consider holding in liquid hard assets?
Well, that's a great question. It's very hard to say, and I think it kind of has to be tailored towards the individual. But again, if you're preparing for a worst case scenario, that means that you should, be taking any extra fiat currency you have and converting that into hard assets as much as you can get your hands on it. And I still say this, that silver, physical silver, in my professional opinion, is the most undervalued asset of them all. In fact, I can't think of one other asset, maybe other than water. I mean, that is, because we're running out of water as well. You know that here, especially in this part of the country where I live. But I mean, this is it from a financial standpoint. People say, where should I put my cash? And I'm putting my money where my mouth is, or my cash where my mouth is, and I've been dollar cost averaging into these metals for years, and I will continue to do that until such a time where it's not feasible anymore. But if you just look around and you understand how desperate the world central banks are becoming, it should really make people's the hair in the back of their neck stand up and say, I need to do something. I need to do it now. I think it's very possible that, but what people don't get, again, with the financial system is once you put your cash into a financial institution, it's no longer yours. It really isn't. And not only is it no longer yours, whatever cash you think you have in your bank account isn't there anyway. These banks work off of a fractional reserve system. They lend it all out except for 10%. That's all that's in that account there. So when the stuff really hits the fan here, these banks are not going to allow people to have access to whatever cash that they think they have.